YouTube friend and subscriber Joshua, otherwise known as Answer Tree, drew to my attention a devout Jehovah's Witness with his own website, YouTube channel, and podcast. His name is Robert King, and he goes by the online pseudonyms e-watchman and the Watchman. It was suggested that I listen to one of Watchman's podcasts, which I did, and this apologist makes so many errors answering some questions submitted by an ex-Jehovah's Witness turned atheist that I felt it appropriate to respond. The section of interest in the podcast begins.
As you probably know, I entertain questions from emailers and, in some cases, comments left on the Watchman's post. And so that's what I have today. One emailer, he has several questions here. He says that I feel like I'm losing my faith. I'm afraid I might end up as an atheist. So he says the Bible says stuff that just doesn't make sense. Like God causing a bear to kill a bunch of kids, caring if we plant two different crops next to each other, saying not to wear two different kinds of fabric. You're allowed to hit and kill a slave as long as it takes him a few days to die. I simply cannot reconcile these issues.
Okay. At this point, Robert begins to answer his emailer. He first takes on the question of why God would cause a bear to kill a bunch of kids, a story found in 2 Kings chapter 2, verses 23 through 25.
And he went up from thence unto Bethel, and as he was going up by the way, there came forth little children out of the city, and mocked him, and said unto him, Go up, thou bald head, go up, thou bald head. And he turned back and looked on them, and cursed them in the name of the Lord. And there came forth 2 she-bears out of the wood, and tare 42 children of them. And he went from thence to Mount Carmel, and from thence he returned to Samaria.
You mentioned the bear causing, killing a bunch of kids. Well, you recall that the Jews had sunken into this deplorable state of idolatry and false worship. And Elijah came on the scene to put the name of Jehovah back into the fore and to discredit the prophets of Baal. And you recall that Jehovah took Elijah in a fiery chariot. And so after Jehovah took Elijah out of the scene, so to speak, apparently the news of that incident spread among the Israelites. And so Elisha was walking down the road, and this group of youths started jeering him. And Elisha turned around and called down evil upon them, and these 2 ferocious she-bears came out of the forest and mauled 42 kids and killed them. So Jehovah did that. For one thing, these children apparently... They were telling Elisha to get out of here, go up in the fiery chariot like Elijah. We don't want you down here. We don't want Jehovah's prophet here. So Jehovah answered Elisha's curse. That's what it was, calling down evil. And he took them out. People in the Oriental society would probably understand that better than especially young people in Western society today.
And that's it. That's the Watchman's take on the story of Elisha and the bears. He basically retells the story and says that, quote, Orientals and ancient people would understand that tale better than we do today. But so what? Isn't that the point of the original question? Coming from a modern reader, such a story is like fingernails on a chalkboard, morally. In no sense does disrespecting someone justify murder. Calling someone a name or telling them to get lost or to go jump in a lake is no justification for bloodshed and butchery. You'll note that the Watchman does nothing to help make sense of the story other than to say, in the context of the ancient culture from which it comes, the intentional, willful murder of children for mocking an old bald man is understandable. And yet the Bible clearly states that God does not change, Malachi 3:6. And that He, Jesus Christ, is the same yesterday, today, and forever, Hebrews 3:18. So it matters little that this incident occurred in an ancient cultural setting, because the act of murder was committed by God. He was the one who sent the bears to massacre the 42 children. If he could do it then, he could do it now. And what is the justification? Clearly it would not be cultural. Unless the argument is that God works within the cultural constraints of man and would send bears to maul children 3,000 years ago because that culture would accept such brutality, but wouldn't send them to maul children in the 21st century backcountry of the Colorado Rockies, for example. But evidently he might send them to some place in China, Japan, or Indonesia because, according to Robert the Watchman, Orientals would understand and accept such behavior. Holy crap. What you're hearing here, too, is the admission that while obviously morality stems from God for the theist, such morality is arbitrary, insofar that whatever God does is deemed right, even the wholesale slaughter of children. Of course, this is not unprecedented. God had murdered children, or called for the murder of children, before the Elijah story. In the Great Flood, the death of the firstborn of Egypt, the massacre of the Amalekites, the population of Jericho and other Canaanite cities, and so on and so forth. So really the story of Elijah and the bears is just a new twist to an already established pattern of behavior. God kills those, men, women, children, who diss him. Nothing new to see here. Move along. Some apologists, however, do try to justify God's action in the story. James Patrick Holding, for example, wants to increase the age of those who are mauled. His point is that, whatever the numerical ages involved, the people mauled were, quote, old enough to recognize a prophet of God and insult him, which means whatever the physical age of these children was, their cognitive functions were advanced enough so that they should indeed have known better and should be held responsible for what they did. And again, what did they do? Hurl words of insult at someone. Apparently God would have been appalled by the United States First Amendment, for a number of reasons actually, and not just the free speech clause. Furthermore, Holding asks, what is trivial about insulting someone's bald head? Hysterically, he argues that, quote, natural baldness was a rarity in the ancient Near East, and when done deliberately, that is, the insult regarding baldness, it was a sign of shame, see for example Isaiah 3:17, or mourning, Job 1:20. If Elijah was actually bald here, he was likely mourning the loss of his master Elijah, and then the go on up is a reference to the idea of Elijah's ascension, a suggestion that the event is doubted, and that it is a charge that Elijah actually murdered his master, and that his mourning is a sham. This merely echoes the Watchman's take that, in the context of the ancient Near East, murder for such an insult was justifiable. But who gives a damn? Phelps and his crew have made a ministry out of insulting others, true heroes of the American military, with their antics. And while no one would feel too terrible if a semi plowed through one of their protests, the deliberate murder of Phelps and his followers would carry with it criminal charges. So the question remains unanswered. Why is our morality apparently higher than this biblical God's? Again, Holding tries desperately to try and rescue this God from total skeptical derision by equating these youths with a street gang, a bunch of thugs, hooligans, robbers, and bandits. We move from a story of a bunch of children mocking Elijah, as is told in 2 Kings, to Holding's interpretation of one single word from the text, the Hebrew yaled, which for him implies some of the worst elements of ancient Near East society. These children would have been bandits and thieves who stole from others, which, quote, could have led to the starvation of a family of innocents. By this time, Holding has lost all memory of the context of the story. The offense for which the bears get their meal is the exercise of free speech. It is not for theft that the children are mauled. It is not for the starvation, or potential starvation, of innocents that the bears destroy their bodies. God is merely answering a prayer from Elijah regarding an insult. Whether Elijah's feelings are hurt, his social standing is called into question, or his appearance is mocked, the bottom line here is that God answers a prayer of vengeance and sends animals to maul others for a verbal insult. That's it. The text suggests no more without a rather liberal and free-roving interpretation.